Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Veterans of the IDF's ground arm have consistently lobbied for more armor, infantry, and artillery units and less reliance on the Israeli Air Force. Their call for sending ground divisions across the border, rather than relying upon fighter planes, helicopters, and UAVs bombing targets from above, was finally answered in this Gaza War. Nevertheless, the Israeli Air Force does remain essential in this campaign in targeting tunnels and headquarters, providing close air support to the troops below, deterring other enemies from entering the conflict, intercepting missiles and UAVs, not to mention being the weapon of choice should Israel be forced to take the fight far from its own borders, namely from Iran to Yemen. So is the Israeli Air Force still as vital an asset to Israel's defense as it has been in times past? With us to ponder this question are Brigadier General in Reserve Reddick Shafir, who is a former Israeli Air Force commander as well as a fighter pilot. Thank you for joining us, sir. Also joining us from an undisclosed location is Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, who is also a former Israeli Air Force commander, fighter pilot, as well as the former chief of the IDF cyber staff. Thank you for joining us, General.
Good evening, Jonathan.
It's good to have you both. With me in the studio, of course, is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, give us a broader understanding of this strategic tool, which has been famed around the world for multiple extraordinary missions. But ultimately, there is still a dialogue ongoing about where to invest and where to assume that this investment will serve best the state of Israel.
So the IAF has been made famous both because of its attack and intercept functions. Of course, surprising the Egyptian Air Force on the ground in 1967, and as a fighter force led by the likes of Reddick Shafir here, who shot down Arab fighter planes by both an F-16 and an F-15, a very rare occasion, very rare exploit by a fighter pilot. The Israeli Air Force finally won over the Egyptian and Syrian air forces, and by the mid-1980s, there was no enemy to speak of in the air. And obviously the Arab countries and later the Arab militias, such as Hezbollah and Hamas, tried to bypass this dominance by Israel through surface-to-surface missiles, surface-to-air missiles, rockets, UAVs, and the like. But your introduction points to the unique asset which the IAF is to Israel, because it operates on all levels of war: strategic, operational, tactical. It is both a hammer and a pinprick, if needed. Micro munitions, which can go through a window to a certain apartment, or even to a certain seat in a vehicle, not hurting the passenger next to the driver, and also the F-35 and other vehicles, aircraft, which Israel has if it decides to launch an attack against Iran or other targets. So yes, there was criticism mostly by the ground forces regarding the investment in the Air Force vis-a-vis what the defense budget had for other branches. But if you look at the various scenarios that Israel must keep in mind, in addition to what now happens in Gaza or in the Lebanese borders, it was a very wise investment.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. Well, I'd like to ask first General Shafir, could you please classify for us the Israeli Air Force as the go-to strategic tool of the Israeli Cabinet Office or the War Cabinet at times of war to contend with threats and targets, as well as maintaining the national security, both near and in far theaters as well?
The Israeli Air Force is not just an Air Force as you can find, let's say, in the United States, but it's also Army aviation, search and rescue, Coast Guard aviation, Marines, um, and that includes fighter helicopters, UAVs, fighter airplanes, and also anti-aircraft or anti-air delivered munition arm, including ICBMs and including small arms of fire such as short-range rockets. So this range, with obviously electronic warfare and other issues, is the basis of the Air Force helping the IDF ward off any dangers and allowing airplanes to go from one side of the country to the other within about 25 minutes. So it's much like a carrier, a big carrier that is able to wield its power within minutes or hours, if need be, a larger number of airplanes, because all the air crews and ground crews who are in reserve and are actually helping in that retain experience through the years are able to join forces with the regulars within the same squadrons or the same forces. And that's a force multiplier in the fact that you don't have to retrain all the time new recruits, but can actually rely on a long range experience of pilots who fly about once a week to keep their capabilities. So that these are several force multipliers that give the Air Force the ability to actually touch every security point required around Israel, from the close air support or within Israel itself to long ranges such as Iran or Bab el-Mandab, or as was shown in 1986, way out to Tripoli in Libya.
Indeed. General Wazan, when we're looking at the complexities which the Israeli Air Force deals with, let's go down memory lane to a period that I wasn't there, at least, the 6th of October, 1973, the moment when a number of Arab nations have simultaneously struck Israel and surprised it, namely the Yom Kippur War. And one of the key issues that Israel had to deal with is the loss of air superiority over the Sinai Peninsula, particularly due to Soviet missiles at the time, or silos being established along the Suez Canal, and therefore the ground maneuver that was conducted had to do with limited air support, and until the advances were made to eliminate those capabilities, Israel had to contend with a very challenging reality. Now, when we're looking to northern Israel today, we're seeing on the one hand the Syrian and Iranian, a few Iranian missile silos or surface to air capabilities being implemented in Syria, which do not threaten Israel's aerial superiority. Nevertheless, we do have also Russia there, which forces Israel to take into consideration its vocal and open support to Ukraine within the context of being part of the Western camp. And therefore, to what degree is the strategic concept that Israel is relying on today truly representative to the threats at hand?
Jonathan, I think that coming to, having the advantage as an Air Force in any region, anywhere around the world, it entails a very long-term force buildup and investments that you need to decide on for years. You have to consider what your enemy is building up in front of you. And for many years, as you've mentioned, in the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago, the arms race was surface to air versus airplanes. And today it's something different. It's actually the stupid missiles. So our enemies have realized that our air superiority writ large is Israel has an advantage, a well defined and well proven advantage with airplanes. So our enemies shifted over the years from building air forces to building scaling really, really successfully. If you look at it from their standpoint, scaling the one-way, one-time air forces, which are missiles and rockets. And they've done this in a way that the scale of the threat has overwhelmed, if you will, Israel's air power in many ways. But having said that, I think this describes also Israel moving forward. So again, this is an arms race that goes from both sides. That is why Israel's Air Force has taken upon itself not only as being the greatest attack force in the IDF, but also, as Rennick mentioned, it is also the defense. It's all the Air Force is responsible for defense and offense, and having both of these on its plate as an Air Force provide the Air Force with a very unique place inside the IDF because of the vast responsibilities that it holds besides the ground maneuver, which of course is the responsibility of the regional commands and the ground forces in the IDF. But besides that, if you think about what's going on today, the responsibility of the Air Force on the attack side and on the defense side are huge. Even the alert side, part of it is the Home Front Command, but a lot of it is coming from Air Force assets that are used to intercept the missiles. So this development in military operations in Israel's defense forces is something that is very unique, and it comes from the uniqueness. It derives from the uniqueness of air power, its flexibility, its adaptability, its range, and its reach. And if you take all these together, defense and offense, and use everything that was described in the answers before me, I think it is what describes the Air Force today. It is the most, it's the biggest, strongest, strategic, operational, and tactical power that the IDF has today in its arsenal.
We have two modest flyboys. Pilots are usually shy and humble. So
That's how you call it, flyboys? Because ground forces are sand rats,
no,
Marines are fish sticks.
But you see, they are so fresh out of the Air Academy, so hungry for a fight. And why do I say modest? Because Relic Shafir, even under torture, you won't get of him the fact that he took part in the Osirak operation
Operation Opera.
to destroy the Iraqi nuclear reactor. Even now, he's hiding from the camera. But I would like to enumerate several of the strong points of the Israeli Air Force, which are more than just counting how many F-35s, F-15Is, F-16Is, and so on, or counting the wings and then dividing them by two, which gets you to approximately the same number. The strong points of the Israeli Air Force are the operational staff, which I believe General Rosen has just come out of a watch there since he's wearing his uniform. And the way you generate missions or sorties is a real force multiplier. Because if the same plane can go out, come back from a mission, be refueled, gets its munitions, gets a fresh pilot. It also depends on the pilot to plane ratio. And if you can refuel it on the way over, these are the sorts, and of course, intelligence and planning. These are what makes the difference between a modern Air Force, such as the IAF, and a very mediocre one. And the Arab Air Forces, especially in the Gulf countries, are dependent on contract maintenance by foreigners. Probably Iran too is not excellent at maintenance. And if war comes, these two will make the difference between the IAF and its enemies.
Well, as General Shafir noted, Israel is like an aircraft carrier, and namely, there have been several aircraft carriers operational in the Strait of Hormuz area during the campaign against Saddam Hussein in the early 2000s, which have operated flights both in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan simultaneously and have yielded very impressive results.
But the sailors go home only every 6 or 9 months, while the Israeli pilots can see their families more frequently.
Indeed. Well, let's take all that we heard right now and bring it to reality at this moment in time. Moscow and Tehran, this relationship is bolstering, and unfortunately, one of the arrangements that have come out of this unholy matrimony is the sale, potentially, of the Sukhoi 57 advanced aircraft that aims to compete, which is Moscow's narrative, with of course, Western aircraft, namely the multi-role F-35, the F-16I, and other aircraft which are particularly American-made. And therefore, I'd like to ask you, and we'll start with General Shafir, and we'll follow with General Rosen, what is, at this stage, the challenge, if I may, within this arms race, which General Rosen has mentioned, to stay on edge, to always keep in one step ahead of the adversary when those adversaries are as reliant on Russia as Israel is reliant on the United States?
Let's compare, for instance, the Su-57 and the F-35. The Russians have put a lot of emphasis in the last 30 years or so on a very high angle of attack maneuverability of their fighters, so that they match the F-15s, F-16s, and even supersede those. Whereas modern warfare, through the use of the missiles, helmet-mounted sights, EW, stealth, long-range missiles, have put the emphasis on the fact that you try not to get into a close fight, because once you go through these high AOA, which is angle of attack maneuvers at slow speeds, you are vulnerable to get shot by missiles, because you cannot produce an evasive maneuver with high G to offset the missiles. So think of the F-35 that can get its own intelligence through its radar, whether it be on the ground or in the air, can relay the information on and not just the F-35, all the Israeli Air Force airplanes use a web system where they can exchange information with each other. Just an example, if one pilot looks at an enemy airplane, it can, by a click of a button, relay the data to another airplane and the pilot in the other airplane gets cues on his helmet-mounted sight where to look for that target, be it on the ground or in the air. This is a force multiplier by one hand. It can also relay data from its radar to the ground station and to the command and control to get the target, let's say, to a UAV. So when we're talking about embedded systems within the airplanes, within the command and control system, and within the whole Air Force, so that the right munition can reach the right target a lot faster than it used to. Where the Su-57 is a good airplane, but it doesn't operate as an orchestra um, that where the different elements can interchange data or even evade the Su-57 on the one hand and have somebody else attack it from the side that it can't see. So as a single airplane, the Su-57 is, I would even say, a marvel as the way it looks in air shows, but not as a system and part of a systematic orchestra.
You managed to convince at least one in the studio, General Rosen?
Yes, I think that this shows exactly what we spoke about. Force buildup in militaries is a huge challenge, and I think the Russians built a great aircraft, no doubt. I mean, it is a remarkable aircraft, probably, but it is about a decade, maybe even 2 decades behind the F-35s and the F-22. Because first of all, the Russians just started deploying the Su-57. I think they have very few aircrafts right now. They're not even deploying it in Ukraine because they have so few. And that shows you, the decisions you make 15 years ago, 15 years ago, are now coming into play. Even absorbing a new aircraft, deploying it, getting it, let's say you get it for free. If I'm Iran, I'm getting it for free. It's not like I'm going to fly it tomorrow and I'm operational. It takes a long time. And the Russians don't have so much experience with this Su-57. It's still a new aircraft. It's a new platform. It has problems. And I think they will grow to maybe 1 or 2 squadrons in the next year or two. And what does that mean that the Iranians are getting it? It means that there is a threat probably to aircrafts flying around Iran, but how fast will we see it really operational in an Iranian squadron? I think we have a little bit time to see that happening. And again, going back to what was mentioned on a platform, an airplane versus a system, I think the United States has built a better battle-ready system. So the F-35 is part of a network and provides better network warfare, targeting, intelligence. It's a huge intelligence platform that provides intelligence to a wide range of platforms on the ground, in the air, in order to better utilize various munitions on a specific target. That is the greatest advantage of the US-made platforms. Again, not putting down anything about this threat. The Russians have a great air industry, and they're building great platforms, whether they are fighter jets or attack helicopters, or the search and rescue helicopters. They're also very great platforms, flying for decades and doing greatly in militaries. But I think it's just a different level right now, and I'm glad that we're utilizing these great US platforms rather than the Russians.
Thank you, General Zin and General Shafir. I think one of the big discussions right now in Washington, which also has direct impact not only on Israel, but also on all NATO member states who maintain interoperability with one another, is the fact that they are always discussing the quality versus quantity, since the Russians are a lot more focused on the quantity of issues, and we see the quality of their systems, some of which are pretty resilient. Nevertheless, we're seeing that it is diminished as opposed to Western capabilities, which are much more focused on the quality rather than the quantity, which at times of all-out war, unfortunately, you need to find the right balance between the two. Mr. Oren, the last 35 seconds are yours.
When General Shafir, who is somewhat older than General Rosen, grew up in Israel and for a while in Scotland, it was the Israeli pilot in a Mirage, a French-made plane, against the Syrian or Egyptian pilot in a Soviet-made MiG. And the skill of the individual pilot was very important. Now, as Relic Shafir mentioned, it's the system. And also, a plane is most vulnerable on the ground. So the base must be protected, and an alternate site in order to have continuity in war is very important, and the IAF is putting an emphasis on it.
Absolutely. Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Shafir and General Rosen, as well as Mr. Oren here in the studio, of course, and I'd like to thank all of you at home. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.